So in a chain of custody, this seemed very much like a verified story. Trump claimed it was false and sued. The judge, though, wrote that President Trump has not even plausibly alleged the defendants published the article with malice, and the president has been unable to sow any real questions about the authenticity of that letter. Remember, this is what Trump was saying at the time, filing what is now a loser lawsuit.
Read that again. Not, we couldn't quite prove it. Not the evidence was mixed. A federal judge in a written ruling said the President of the United States could not even plausibly allege malice and could not raise any real questions about whether the drawing was real. That's not a close call. That is a judge telling the most powerful man in the country that his entire legal theory didn't clear the lowest bar in civil litigation. And this was supposed to be the lawsuit that made it all go away. Here's the backstory, and it matters. According to the transcript, the Wall Street Journal first reported on a birthday greeting Trump allegedly made for Jeffrey Epstein. A drawing, not a guest list, not a photo at a party. A drawing, something personal, something handcrafted, something that shows, as the narrator put it, a far more direct kind of kinship than just showing up at an event. So Trump sued. He went after the Journal for defamation. And for weeks, his public defense was this oddly specific phrase, "I don't do drawings." Over and over, "I don't do drawings." Which, if you listen closely, isn't actually a denial that he signed or sent that birthday card. It's a denial that he is, in general, a guy who draws. That is a very carefully engineered non-answer. And this was the exact moment the whole thing fell apart for him, because the court didn't care about the marketing slogan. The court cared about the evidence. And the evidence had a chain of custody. The Journal reported on the drawing. Then, as stated in the transcript, the House Oversight Committee later obtained that same drawing directly from the Epstein estate. So you've got independent confirmation arriving through a completely separate channel pointing at the same document. That is what lawyers mean when they say a story has chain of custody. It doesn't rely on one reporter or one source. It comes from multiple hands in multiple places, all pointing at the same thing. And then comes the twist almost nobody saw coming. Rupert Murdoch owns Fox News. He owns the Wall Street Journal. He runs the media empire that has for years been the softest landing Trump has in American press. And according to the transcript, unlike some other major company heads who have been folding, settling, caving, Murdoch stood by the reporting. He defended it in court. And he won. That is a big deal. Because the playbook Trump has used over and over, sue the outlet, embarrass the publisher, wait for a settlement, spin the settlement as vindication, it only works when the other side blinks. Murdoch didn't blink. And the moment Murdoch didn't blink, the whole strategy collapsed. This was the exact moment the Epstein drawing stopped being a Trump claims it's fake story and started being a court-confirmed piece of the record.
So chalk that up as a big Epstein loss for Trump. Meanwhile, some other corporate executives who have also been cozy with Trump are making moves. David Ellison is the billionaire who owns CBS and is in the process of this big media merger, and he's now hosting a special private dinner to honor Trump. This comes as, of course, Trump's administration reviews his merger aspiration, taking on CNN and Warner Brothers Studios. So there's plenty of bad news these days. There's bad news in the economy. Americans pay more for gas and groceries. But right now we turn to some good economic news and legal news, because Democratic attorneys general have now bested a giant corporation in a case over monopoly practices that hurt consumers. If the topic rings a bell, there has been outrage over Ticketmaster and Live Nation gouging consumers on big concerts. This was a big deal around Taylor Swift, you might recall. And it's been a bipartisan concern because music fans come in all ideologies, something we talk about sometimes here on The Beat. Even MAGA favorite Kid Rock testified against this same company's monopoly tactics in Congress. And today marks a huge legal victory in this fight. New York Attorney General James has won, as a New York jury determined that this Live Nation Ticketmaster conglomerate was running an illegal monopoly. That's against the law. There was evidence of abusing market power to overcharge people, to shake down different venues. Lawmakers have been calling out Ticketmaster's illegal practices for many years. And this is the throwback I mentioned. In some of the hearings, people were quoting lyrics. Imagine that. That's something that happens sometimes. These were not hip hop. They were usually Taylor lyrics.
What Ticketmaster and its parent company Live Nation are doing looks like an illegal monopoly.
As a ode to Taylor Swift, I will say we know all too well.
This merger between Live Nation and Ticketmaster will absolutely have and continue to have a detrimental effect on their prices.
Ticketmaster ought to look in the mirror and say, I'm the problem. It's me.
I think it's a nightmare dressed like a daydream. And I don't think we ought to go there.
But this is about more than aging political nerds quoting Taylor Swift, although that is, of course, a wonderful thing, and you're free to do it. Antitrust prosecutors, all the way back in the Biden DOJ, were pushing this case. It has huge economic and cultural impact. So back in 2019, they were going at the antitrust issues. Now, the Trump DOJ continued this case for a while. Unlike some of the other things where Trump kind of does the opposite of whatever Biden did, they kept it going. One, there was a valid legal argument. And two, immediately surrendering would have been very unpopular. I just showed how that montage had Republicans as well going at Ticketmaster. But as it got to trial, Trump prosecutors settled. And we reported that at the time, over 30 states which had joined this case vowed to keep fighting. That brings us up to today. DOJ had gone easy on the big company. They weren't requiring a breakup. But now the states with this win have more leverage. The judge will decide remedies in another proceeding building off of this. That could include possible divestments or separation to break up this very unpopular conglomerate that has found to be monopolistic. There could even be monetary damages. This is one of those things that when you see that it started all the way back as early as 2019 across two administrations, the feds in and out and states, you say, God, what a hassle. And that's the thing about some very important matters of justice or economic fairness. They are a hassle, and these big companies actually spend a lot on lawyers and lobbyists and the rest to try to drag it out and grind it out and slowly, hopefully win. Well, tonight, the news is they lost.
And today is really a victory, not only for those attorneys general, but primarily for fans, for consumers, and for the rule of law. It's really critically important because Live Nation and its subsidiary Ticketmaster engaged in this monopoly where they focused primarily on ticket sales, where they focused on promotion, where they owned a significant number of venues and marketing as well. And so we are seeking divestiture to break up these two companies. It goes back to when they were first merged in 2010. There were some terms that DOJ put in place, and then in 2020 they again violated those terms. And so it's important that individuals understand the reason why we decided to move forward with this case is because they continued to violate those terms. They are a recidivist organization, a corporation. And how does that work? And it was really critically important.
So many consumers, they feel like completely outgunned. And so you, with, as you mentioned, other attorneys general in other states, you fought this for consumers. What do you say to people who feel completely outgunned by these big companies? What's going to change for them?
Listen to the word she used. Recidivist. That is a legal term you usually hear about repeat criminal offenders. She is applying it to a corporation. And she is applying it for a reason. Because according to the transcript, Live Nation and Ticketmaster didn't just run afoul of the rules once. They merged in 2010 under specific DOJ terms. They violated those terms. By 2020, they violated them again. And now, in a New York courtroom, a jury has officially found that the company is running an illegal monopoly. And this is where it gets interesting. Because this case tells you something about who actually protects consumers and who quietly doesn't. The transcript lays it out in order. Antitrust prosecutors under the Biden DOJ were pushing this case. Fine. Then Trump's DOJ came in. And here's the part a lot of people missed. They didn't kill it. They kept it going. Why? Because, as the narrator explains, two things were true at once. There was a valid legal argument, and immediately surrendering would have been very unpopular. Even Kid Rock, a MAGA favorite, had testified against this exact company in Congress. This was one of the rare issues where both sides of the political spectrum were pointing at the same villain. But then, something shifted. As it got to trial, Trump's prosecutors settled. They went easy. According to the transcript, the DOJ did not require a breakup. They let the most powerful ticketing monopoly in American history walk away without the structural remedy that actually matters. And here's where the story turns. Because over 30 states, led by attorneys general like Letitia James, refused to take the settlement. They said no. They kept fighting. They took it to a jury, and the jury gave them a complete liability verdict. Watch what happened next, because this is the part Ticketmaster's lawyers are panicking about tonight. The verdict just decided liability, meaning, yes, they broke the law. Now comes the remedies phase. And in that phase, according to the transcript, the state AGs are asking for divestiture, a breakup, a forced separation of Live Nation from Ticketmaster, and a forced divestiture from the amphitheaters they control. Because, and this number is staggering, they own 70% of the venues in the country. 70%. That is not a ticketing company. That is an empire with a ticketing company at the front door. And this is where you see why the state AGs refused to settle. Because the federal government was willing to let this sit. The federal government, under both administrations, depending on the moment, was willing to let a company that the jury has now labeled as running an illegal monopoly simply pay a fine and move on. The state said no. The state said, we are going to break it up. That's the difference. And that is why this verdict matters far beyond concert tickets. 2 courtrooms, 1 news cycle. In one, a federal judge looked at Donald Trump's defamation case against the Wall Street Journal over the Epstein birthday drawing, and according to the transcript, ruled that Trump could not even plausibly allege malice and could not raise real questions about whether the drawing was authentic. The Journal's reporting stood. Rupert Murdoch stood behind it. The House Oversight Committee independently confirmed the drawing through the Epstein estate. The lawsuit, the whole point of which was to make this story go away, was tossed. In the other courtroom, a jury looked at Ticketmaster and Live Nation, a company that 2 administrations' DOJs had either softened on or outright settled with, and told the country the truth everybody already felt in their wallets. It's an illegal monopoly. A recidivist one, in the AG's own word, and now the states are going for the breakup. Here's the through line. The elite legal playbook is the same everywhere. Delay. Settle. Stall. Use lawyers and lobbyists to grind opponents down until they give up. As the narrator said in the transcript, these big companies spend enormous sums to drag it out, grind it out, and slowly, hopefully, win. Today, that playbook broke. In 2 separate rooms. On the same day, Trump lost the Epstein case he was counting on to change the narrative. Ticketmaster lost the monopoly case it was counting on to outlast its critics. And the message from both courts to the powerful, to their lawyers, to everybody who thought the game was rigged beyond repair is exactly the same. Not this time. If you want us to keep tracking these courtrooms, the Epstein chain of custody, the Ticketmaster remedies phase, every single ruling that actually matters, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and drop 1 word in the comments. Tossed. That's it. Let us know you're paying attention. We'll be back the second the remedies hearing drops.